Hey guys, welcome to the video. What we are going to do today is we're going to learn about what JSON is, क्या है, why it came into existence, and everything of that sort, right? And we are just going to give it a try with Flutter, right? So this is going to be a long journey. We'll get to know what JSON is, क्या करना है उससे, वो क्यों आया, and then we will learn how we can handle it in the Dart projects, right? So let's get started. This is going to be fun. So what I have here is basically a blank project. ठीक है, इसमें कुछ नहीं है. This is just a blank project created Flutter का, and I have a file trial.json. ठीक है. Now what JSON is it is actually nothing but simply key value pairs. ठीक है, nothing big of that sort. The key has to be a string. ठीक है, key हमेशा string ही रहेगा. It cannot be anything else. Whereas the value, it can either be a string or it can be an int, a boolean, anything of that sort. Okay. It can also be another JSON object in itself, or it can be a JSON array. Now JSON object is nothing but this, an object जिसमें key value pair store होता है. ठीक है, value can be any other JSON objects or any other JSON array. A JSON array is simply put a set of JSON objects. तो मल्टीपल JSON ऑब्जेक्ट्स जब एक एरे में स्टोर होते हैं उसको एक JSON एरे बोलते हैं. ठीक है, नो बिगी, फाइन. So now why JSON came into existence is every language has different ways to deal with any kind of data type, right? So ultimately front end mein we are right now using Dart. For web projects we use JavaScript. For there are many different platforms. Every platform may have its own implementation. Some have Java and n number of languages out there. कचरे जैसे बहुत कुछ है, right? So it became important for some format to be available जिससे you can actually send data from one language to another, from a server to client or a client to server, whatever it is. And JSON happens to be just one of those languages. Actually, JSON actually is not a language per se. It is a structure, a schema in which you can actually send data so that the server can implement the same structure and parse it into the instances or objects however it wants to handle that particular JSON, right? So now JSON actually stands for JavaScript Object Notation. As I said, the server or the client per se need to parse that JSON. Okay, this is one thing which happens different in JavaScript and many other languages. All of the languages, whenever they want to parse JSON, they have their own data types. Like for example, Dart has map and list. तो JSON जब parse होता है तो list और map में parse होता है. Whereas JavaScript per se does not need any kind of parsing. It has to obviously parse from string to its data type, but अलग सा कुछ करना नहीं पड़ता because JSON in itself is actually a derivative from JavaScript, right? So JSON is actually the way in which objects and arrays are represented in JavaScript itself. तो JavaScript में अलग सा उसको parsing कुछ करना नहीं पड़ता. It can simply be passed into objects and arrays and used directly. Whereas in case of Dart or in case of Java or in case of any type of strongly typed language, it has to be passed into instances. It should be passed into instances. Dart has an option to not parse it into hard classes, but simply map and list. But ideally, mat karo. Use a parser and parse it into instances. Statically typed languages are much better for a developer experience. खुद का experience का थोड़ा तो ख्याल रखो यार. Fine. So what we'll do is we'll actually query these kind of JSONs and we'll learn how to we can handle them, right? So let's try it out. So what I have here is basically a blank project. जो अपना वो counter वाला जो project by default बनता है वही है. And what we are going to do is we are going to query an API, एक fake store API करके एक है, it's freely available. We are going to query this and get all the products from it. This is the schema in which that particular API sends us the data. So यहाँ पे if you see, this is actually a JSON array and there are multiple objects in it. Each of these objects are called as JSON objects, and this would be the key using which we can actually get the data and use it somewhere. So for this we obviously need some kind of code to actually query, and for querying, for making network calls, there's one very basic package जो HTTP करके एक package है, Dart team का ही है, and this package can be used for basic query. ठीक है, there are many more different network calls करने के लिए packages which maybe you should actually look at for creating proper production apps, because इसमें by default parsing नहीं होता. So since we are mainly looking at JSON and how we should use it, parsing and encoding, decoding and everything, I'm using this basic package for now. Okay. So before we move ahead, थोड़ा कुछ UI बना लेते हैं. So I'll come back in a jiffy. So now what I have here is basically simple सा UI है, right? जिसमें एक list view डाला है मैंने, and मैंने cards बनाए. यहाँ पे मैंने एक प्रोडक्ट कार्ड बनाया. देयर इज अ वेरी स्पेसिफिक रीजन आई मेड अ विजेट फॉर इट, बिकॉज बार बार रिपीट होना है वो चीज़. फिलहाल तो एवरीथिंग इज हार्ड कोडेड इन इट. तो ऑल ऑफ दीज डेटा आई हैव पिक्ड इट अप फ्रॉम दैट एपीआई फॉर नाउ. हार्ड कोड किया हुआ है. we'll soft code this soon, and this thing, this entire widget goes inside the list view builder. फिलहाल मैंने 5 किया है इसलिए 5 इंस्टेंसेस है. 10 करूँ तो 10 बार आएगा. So now when we are actually loading this page, we first need to actually get all the data, right? So for that what I have done is I have created the init state and उसमें मैंने get data करके फिलहाल खाली है. I have just called a blank function. Now we'll write the code to actually get the data and then see what that API actually returns, कैसा return करता है actual में data, and how we can actually handle those things right now. ठीक है. So for that, as I said, HTTP client करके एक package है. I'm using that package. I need to use that package. So I'm just going to simply install it. So I'll just copy this and paste it here. So yeah, every dependency nahi. Yeah, paste it here. Pub get. Once I actually get that dependency, I'll restart the app once. So meanwhile, what I'll do is I'll actually write the code to get that data. So उसके लिए actually I need to import it. Now you can actually directly write get or post here, but HTTP के साथ वो directly get post लिखोगे तो बहुत बार confusion होता है, and these are very common words, so they can create conflicts. So what usually is done is you import it using a named import, ठीक है, as HTTP, and then you use HTTP dot get. So I have a response. This is going to be an async function. ठीक है, async functions are pretty good. If you don't know, have a look. We'll video भी आ जाएगा soon. And then I'll query this endpoint here. ठीक है, इसमें they need a URI. So URI dot parse and this. ठीक है. So for now, what I'll do is I'll simply print the response. Wait भी करना पड़ेगा obviously. I'll simply print the response and see कि क्या आता है. ठीक है. So we restart the app and yeah, see यहाँ पे all we got was simply an instance of a class called as response. ठीक है. This response class basically comes from inside this HTTP package. So To actually get data from it, what you have to do is you use a variable called as body from inside that response. Now, if I print this body, and again, if I restart the app, see, बहुत लंबा चौड़ा सा एक JSON string आता है. Now, what you need to understand is ये जो भी आ रहा है, this is actually a string. So, if I print the type of this particular response, you will notice that it is actually a string. Okay, it is not a map, it is not a list, it is not any instance or class or object right now. ठीक है, it is simply a string. तो जब data actually API से आया हुआ है वो टाइम पे it is simply a string, and now वो string को अपने को convert करना है into something that we can actually use. ठीक है, this process is called as parsing. ठीक है, or deserialization. When you convert an instance or an object into string, it is called as serialization. Okay, and when you, in the reverse of it, when you convert a string into an object or an instance, it is called as deserialization. Now deserialization is actually an intensive process. Okay, so if you are deserializing hundreds and hundreds of data in your main thread, UI अटक जाएगा. So always ensure that you are not deserializing a big amount of data in your main thread, or your UI will become janky. Okay. So now to actually deserialize this, we can simply actually use something called as JSON decode, which is a default function available in Dart itself. तो Dart के अंदर से वो package से ही आ रहा है. And if I simply run this again, you will notice that we actually get the same log, but the type now is actually a list of dynamic. ठीक है, this is dynamic because obviously उसको कुछ type दिया नहीं है. It can be anything. Right now we know that it is actually a map. ठीक है, this is why parsing into classes and instances is actually very necessary. You will get to know soon. ठीक है, now what we need to do is ये जो भी return हुआ है उतना time, obviously those are the products that we want to show here, right? So what I'll do is, let's take an array of products here. ठीक है, तो blank है फिलहाल, and then products, product नहीं यार, product naming टिक करना है, naming टिक करना है, and add all, and simply copy and paste. ठीक है, बहुत आलसी. And once this is done, actually ये पूरा चीज भी we should do it inside set state so that the UI re-renders. ठीक है, or you can actually use a future builder too. Fine, no issues. And यहाँ पे we'll give products.length and save. Now if we restart, you can see products आया. इस बार बहुत सारे 5 से ज़्यादा है. जितना वो लेंथ में आया, obviously all of the data is still the same here. हार्ड कोडेड ही है, जादू टोना तो नहीं हो रहा है ना भाई. तो what we need to do right now is each of these entries which are going inside products need to go inside this thing. ठीक है, and show those data in the specific card. ठीक है, so what we will do is we will first get the data, product of index. ठीक है, and then we'll actually pass it here. ठीक है, प्रोडक्ट करके कुछ है नहीं, तो we'll have to create. ठीक है, प्रोडक्ट पास हो गया, एंड नाउ व्हाट वील डू इज we'll start stop coding this thing. ठीक है, so we know कि ये प्रोडक्ट के अंदर we have something called as, अच्छा, meanwhile simply if we can actually do this, what we'll do is reload type and rerun. ठीक, अभी ये एरर को इग्नोर करो फिलहाल. If you see this, we get to know कि each of the elements, each of the JSON object जो वो JSON में आया है has been converted into something called as a map string dynamic. This is basically generics. This basically says कि इसका key हमेशा string ही है and the value can be anything. ठीक है, so Dart में by default JSON object is converted into map, ठीक है, with string dynamic, and JSON array is basically a list. ठीक है, तो यहाँ पे we can actually simply take, instead of dynamic, we can take it as map, and this we know is image. This is basically title, product title, and this is description. ये क्या है, प्राइस है, क्या है, व्हाट इज दिस, प्राइस, price, and this is coming from inside rating. अभी rating, see now यहाँ पे if you see rating is a key and it has another JSON object in it, ठीक है, which has rate and count. तो यहाँ पे what will come is basically product rating rate, and I'll simply copy this, paste, count, save, and restart. See, now all of the data जो भी API से query हो रहा था, all of them are here. ठीक है, उनका image आ गया, उनका description आ गया, उनके ratings आ गए, but even a small mistake here will actually have a catastrophic effect, because अगर for example अगर मैंने price के जगह 30 लिख दिया, and if I just rerun this, you will notice कि यहाँ पे null आ गया. Oops, sorry. Yeah, so यहाँ पे if I just rerun again, and yeah, all of the places जहाँ पे price आना चाहिए था, सब जगह पे null आ गया, just because of this one thing. And if I just correct this and save, see, the problem with using simply JSON decode करके deserialize करके map string dynamic is even a small mistake in using the proper key values will fetch wrong value or might fetch null. Obviously तो है ही नहीं तो आएगा ही नहीं, and this can cause errors and issues with your code obviously. ठीक है, this is the reason why you should always try to parse it into an instance, deserialize this into an instance, and then use it, because that will actually make your code much more type safer, and also help you with using auto completions, using IDE to the fullest. Okay, so how we can do that, we'll see in the next video. Bye bye.